All right, I think we can go ahead and get started here. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Haley Hadaball. I'm the Events and Programs Manager here at the NTC. I'd like to welcome you all to our first Tech Coach of the 2024-25 calendar year. The topic today is going to be on interview tips, and I'm pleased to introduce our host, Jonathan Etheridge, who's the Vice President of IT for Banfield Pet Hospitals at Mars. So Jonathan, thank you for being here, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you.
Thank you, Haley. I appreciate it. And thanks everyone who's taking the time out of your busy schedule today to be here to hopefully learn, take a nugget or two away that'll help you, both as someone who's potentially on the one side of the table as an interviewee, looking to make it a transition either within your company to your best next move or externally to another opportunity that fulfills you and allows you to continue to grow personally and professionally. But also hopefully some tips for folks that might be sitting on the other side of the table as an interviewer as well, because success as an interview is, I think, being able to understand both sides of the equation. Not only why is the person asking that question of me specifically, but then how can I best position myself in an authentic and honest way to positively differentiate. So you'll hear a lot today as we go through the content about positive differentiation. But my background, so I've been in leadership for over 25 years, 20 of that in digital technology. Background was in military leadership. Have worked in human healthcare as a CIO and as a CIO of a healthcare system in Alabama, and as the owner of my own healthcare technology consulting practice. And then the last 5 years, I've been with Mars Incorporated. So Mars is an organization of over 150,000 associates globally. In my current capacity, I've led our digital growth. So that's supporting globally all of our marketing, sales, corporate affairs, and product innovation teams. And I'm moving into a new role. So I'm currently in transition, having recently gone through this process as someone who's had to interview for my next role as well. Into the role as Vice President of Digital Strategy and Transformation for our Banfield Pet Hospitals division, which operates 1,000 preventative care pet hospitals across the United States and Puerto Rico currently. So that's some of the things we're going to talk about today. One, we're going to talk about interview prep and what should you be doing to not only understand the market, the industry, and the company that you're looking at, but then also your own internal reflection. Is this really the right time and opportunity for me to pursue? And then we'll get into more of the tactical execution. What are some things you need to think about as you show up for the day, as you prepare for the day, and think about what's going on within the context of the conversation itself. So we'll dig into all of that, and then please either post questions in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end, or we'll get through the prepared content, and we'll try to make sure there's plenty of time for follow-up questions. Yeah, so we'll hop right in. So the first thing you want to do is you want to actually kind of research the company. And why that's important is because, even if you find the perfect role, if the culture of the company doesn't fit or what you were looking for at the company doesn't fit, it's not going to be a positive experience for you. And often it can set you back. It can be very difficult to recover from those types of moves. So I think it's really important to look at the company itself. And when I'm talking about looking at the company, go to their website first and look at their news stories. Get an idea of the type of things that they're celebrating. What cultural aspects of the company are they promoting? If they just won a major award around the EI&D initiatives, maybe they were a best place to work for women, or maybe they were best place to work for promoting certain classes or elements into leadership roles or whatever. Look for those things that they celebrate, because that'll tell you a lot about what they value, and that'll tell you a lot about the company's culture. So you want to see that and see, hey, does that fit with where I'm at personally? Then I think you want to go to the news, and you want to start to look for news stories and highlights about the industry and the company. And that's important because it ties into the fourth bullet here too, which is really understanding what's the financial health of that industry and what is the financial health of that organization. This is really, you can learn a lot of information about how well a company is doing and how it's positioning itself in the market just by looking at, its financial disclosure forms. In disclosure previously, before I took a new role in Mars, I had looked at a role outside of the organization and had gotten to the point where, you know, a job offer's on the table and I turned it down. And it's because of some of this reflection that I had done. And I looked at their financial reports and I had read about the industry, and just got a sense that, I'm seeing things that don't feel right to me, and I'm not sure this is a good long-term strategic bet. So I would also encourage you to look at that element too, because the last thing you want to do is hop into a company just to find out, you're replacing someone who was in round 2 of layoffs and you're now round 3 of layoffs because you're the least tenured person at the organization. So understanding recent history, can be and future direction can be very, very helpful. LinkedIn social media channels as well are great places to get that information. I know there's more kind of ratings and review sites coming out now. I think Glassdoor is one of the big ones. I will say I look at that one with a little bit of a hint of skepticism. You don't see very many people who are happily employed at that organization, usually sharing a lot of detailed contextual information, like people who have maybe recently left or have a bad experience. But that is a great input because you can look for the things that people saying, maybe ignore specific context, but look at trend, right? What are they saying about the new leadership team? Hey, the new CEO came in, been there for a year, and now all of a sudden you're seeing an uptick of negative reviews, right? That's a piece of intelligence that you're going to want as you're looking for your next best move. And then leverage your network. I mean, the people who already work for the company or have worked for the company, maybe even know the leader of the role that you're specifically applying for, looking or being interviewed for. Your network can give you a pretty good hint. My network has saved me many times and said, hey, I know your Jonathan, I know your style. I know what you value in a leader, and I don't think this leader is right for you, or you would love them, that they're perfect for you. That word of mouth from advice from people that I trust is incredibly important. And I encourage you to look through your network and see where you can learn about the company. And as you're researching the company, if you can, you also would love to be able to do similar research either on a company website, other organizational websites, or even just a LinkedIn profile of the hiring manager for the role or people on the panel. Now, not every company gives this information. So obviously this is just if it's available to you, use it. But I know Mars typically shares this information with our folks saying, hey, these are the panelists that you're going to meet with. This is their name. This is their title. So you can get a sense and you can go and look them up and see, hey, are these good people? Look for things you have in common. I think a watch out there is don't be creepy. I have had, people come in interviews and they've looked through everyone's LinkedIn profile that's there, and versus trying to, in the attempt to find connections to commonality, sometimes there was some, it's like, oh, and then I went and looked at your Facebook, and so I was like, yeah, that's a little weird. But LinkedIn can be very valuable to know who you're talking to as well. And it gives you a sense of what does the organization value in that role, because most hiring managers invite other leaders in to interview you, one, because they value your perspective as a panelist on the candidate, but also because this candidate's probably going to work with them on a specific project or work very closely with them directly or members of their team. So understanding who's paneling you can also give you a pretty good sense of what are the types of questions that I'm going to get, what types of answers are relevant to the audience that's in the room at the interview table. So if you can, really try to understand who you're going to talk to. And then read the job description. I mean, really read the job description and understand, okay, what are they looking for? And not just like, hey, do I have all 6 of these skills that are required? Do I have 2 of the 4 that are recommended? Yes, understand that. But this is also a good time to start to think about what examples would I want to share in an interview that might be relevant to this, right? What examples can I pick that show my technical competency with a specific application, in platform framework or whatever the case may be? Or soft skills, right? How can I bring up things that allow me to positively differentiate myself for soft skills that they might be looking for as well? Then comes the internal prep part. And this is by far the most important part. So the first thing is one, why I say research the company and the panel and the role as much as possible is because I think you should ask yourself the question, why do I want to work for this company? And what hesitations do I have about the company? Why do I want this role? And what hesitations do I have about the role, if any? Why me? Why am I the right person to do this? Why do I think this is the right, experience that I need, opportunity that I need? What gaps is it closing for me, or how is it actualizing me and energizing me? Like, understand your motivation. And then why now? Why is this the right time? Is this really the right time for you to transition, or are you dissatisfied in your current role and you're looking? Um, I'll tell you one of the questions that I try to understand in every interview, and I ask anytime one of my associates says, "Hey, I'm thinking about this role. What do you think? Would you sponsor me for it? Do you think I should go for it?" Um, my number one question is just, are you running from something or are you running towards something? Because what I mean by that is, a lot of times people who are not actively in transition, like you haven't lost your job or you're a first time seeker, but you're starting to look either internally or externally while still employed, you're doing it because of a precipitating event. Most people do it because I got a new line manager, or this thing that I wanted didn't come through, or I'm reading tea leaves in the organization that make me feel uncertain. That's when you start to look, and you're more prone in that moment to go for roles out of a sense of urgency or desperation. And sometimes be careful what you wish for, because you might just get that role and you might regret it. So, in addition to not only making sure that you are really running to an opportunity for the right reason, that's also going to help asking those questions and understanding that. It's also going to help you answer one of the most important questions that the interviewers are going to have for you is, why does this person want this role? Like, why is this impactful to you? What does this mean to you? How does this fit into your development plan? That is going to be a question you're most likely going to get. That's something they're going to try to pull out from you. So you need to be prepared to answer that for yourself. And you need to have a good reason why you're going for the role in the first place. Getting to the interview is not the time you should start to do self-discovery on this potential move in your career. So let's talk about the logistics. Now with this hybrid world that we're in, with some people online, some people in an office, some people entirely online, you're going to get a variety of different formats. We do everything from in person, where hey, you come to the site, you come in, everyone's there, we're at a table, to entirely virtual interviews to hybrid. I've had interviews where, even when I came to Mars, the first job that I took at Mars, the interview, it was the first time I had a hybrid interview, in the fact that, if I was interviewing 4 vice presidents, 2 were in the room in front of me and 2 were on a team screen in in a conference room. This first time I'd run into that, and I was confused. I had no idea where to look. I didn't know who to talk to. All the things that I knew about how to kind of hold eye contact and speak to the room was completely thrown into chaos for me. So be prepared and understand the format. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Hey, is everyone going to be in person? Is it going to be hybrid? Similarly, how is the panel going to be run? All companies do it differently. Sometimes it's, you might talk to HR first, and then they'll recommend you to a line manager or the hiring authority. You have a one-on-one interview with the hiring authority. Maybe that's enough. Others, you might have a panel where it's, hey, there's 5 people that are going to consult on the decision with the hiring authority. You interview all of them at once, so they all hear all the questions at the same time. Others do multiple panels. You might only talk to, you might interview the same 6 people total, but it might be 3 different 2-person panels. So you also have to be prepared for those formats, and don't be afraid to ask about the format either. That's not a disrespectful question to ask. In fact, it shows a good knowledge of, hey, how is this going to work? And I'm asking the right questions to seek to understand. So know your format and be prepared to adjust according to the format appropriately. For location, if it's on time, allow plenty of time to arrive, for in person, especially if you've never been there before. My rule of thumb, because again, I'm a former military guy, so if you're on time, you're late, is if I'm going somewhere for the first time or it's extremely important that I be on time. If Waze says it's going to take me 30 minutes, I give myself an hour. I almost always double that time because I don't want Ed to risk being disrespectful to the company that's hosting me and potentially looking at me as an associate to join them. But I also don't want to be frazzled. I want time to just, okay, I've finished the transition and now I need to level set. Maybe I'll think about my examples that I want in my head, or I'll rehearse a little bit, or even just talk to someone comforting. Call your partner, call a friend, and just say, "Hey, I'm here few minutes early. I got a few minutes to kill. You know, pet me up, right? Like give me that boost of energy. Do something. Take advantage of the time. Give yourself the time. Use it how you need it." What I will say is, if you are early, don't go in early. Don't check in early. It is awkward as a hiring manager um, when, okay, my interview is supposed to start at noon and someone's here at 11:25 and they're sitting in the lobby. I'm not ready for you yet. I don't know what to do. I might not know what to do with you. The conference room I booked might not be open. The other panelists might not be available. I'm in a meeting. You're just going to sit there. And you may be completely fine with that, but that can create some anxiety on the part of the hiring team. So what I like to say is get there earlier than you need to. Use that time for yourself. Show up 5 to 10 minutes before the actual start time. By then, typically they're in transition and you have the extra time. You can show respect because you're early, but it's not so early that you create a burden or this need to invest in you right away from the hiring manager. And then attire, some places are pretty open. They'll tell you, hey, attire's dress, attire's casual. I would always assume dress unless you're told otherwise. What I mean by dress, typically, we're getting away from the days of the suit and tie in many cases. That's not always true, but at least have a dress shirt and a jacket on for men, or like a nice blouse or like pantsuit for women, unless you're told otherwise. The other thing I'll say too is if you know you're going into interview season or you you have one, relook at that wardrobe, figure out what you're going to wear, make sure it still fits. I have had plenty of times myself where it's the first time, I'm going to an event, it's the first time I've worn a suit in 8 months. I have to go through 3 or 4 suits sometimes. If you've had some weight changes or you've grown taller or shrunk, make sure the clothes still fit appropriately and aren't dirty or wrinkled. And if you do get new clothes, take off the tags. I have had, especially more junior people who maybe this is their first time that they're interviewing for a role. I've had times where they come in, and I mean, we had one guy come in one time for a help desk role, and you know, God bless him, he had just stopped by Target and bought the shirt on the way there. So the thing still had the packaging lines in it, still had the tag. We literally see the tag that he had just tucked inside, inside the collar, had the sticker with the size on it. But thankfully, we were understanding and we are like, hey, obviously he's nervous. It's first time. Let's extend him some grace. But it is an example of how, some people might not have been as open to understanding that. And they might think, man, this person's disorganized, or make inferences that really aren't true. But all they can see is what you present to them. So make sure you show up professionally. Always assume a +1, full dress if you're not sure, is gonna go a long way. So the big day. Now we're here. We're in the building. We're on the Teams or the Zoom call or some variation thereof. Presentation body language is important. Um, you don't want to be too rigid or too comfortable. Where a lot of people run into problems that I see in interviews, usually you don't make the critical mistake because you're nervous. A lot of people make the critical mistakes when they get comfortable. And just to give you an example, I actually save my hardest questions for the last third of the interview, like the ones where I really want to say, okay, I'm really need someone to give me some critical thinking, maybe be a little authentic or vulnerable, or just answer something that could be tricky. I'll save it for the last part of the interview because at first you're nervous, so everyone's sharp, right? Everyone, your body language is good, you're upright, you're on point, then you start to relax. So the challenge is find a way that you can be comfortable, but stay relaxed. For some people that might be clasp your hands. Sometimes just clasping your hands together, putting them in front of you keeps you in the moment. Or maybe but don't just, do this number and look like you're not interested. It's great you're confident, you want to express confidence, but there's too much. So understand yourself and understand and even mimic the body behavior of the people around you too. I mean, if you see it's a very kind of straight and narrow organization, everyone else is sitting like that, you might want to sit like that too. So match them at a minimum, but watch out for yourself. Same with word choice. When you're nervous, you tend to ramble. When you're comfortable, you tend to overshare. So you want to be very cautious and understand, okay, where am I at in this process? How am I feeling emotionally in this moment? And how can I use language that's helpful versus harmful? Typically, things you want to watch out for are too much industry jargon, especially if you came from like a highly technical background and you're trying to jump industries, right? Like when I was moving from healthcare to manufacturing, there's not a lot of analogs, or like from the military to civilian world, there wasn't a lot of direct analogs. So if you're just throwing around acronyms or terms that are understood, that can be very difficult to convey why they should care about what you're saying, right? Why is this example of my experience pertinent to the question that you've asked? So as you're talking, if you find yourself using an industry term or an acronym, just explain it. Just say, hey, when I was here, I was on the team as the lead application analyst for our ERP system. And you're interviewing a healthcare company. They might not know what an ERP system is, but what you can say is enterprise resource planning system. It's the analog to an electronic medical record. Oh, okay, great. Now we've established a common definition that when you're talking about all the great things you've done to help your current company with their ERP, you could do the same for me with my EMR, right? It was just small things like that. Word choices, try to use them to connect. When it comes to the questions themselves, I talked about staying sharp. You have to stay sharp because that's when you're gonna, be like, well, I was trying to be nice, or you'll slip up, right? You'll give an example earlier and then you'll contradict it later. They might catch that. So you want to be careful. You want to make sure you stay sharp so you don't get caught up in any rough spots, or you don't say something that just, I didn't mean to come across that way, or I don't think I said that in the best possible way. If you don't let your mind wander, you don't get too confident. You want an edge, to what you're doing because this is important. This is impactful. So whatever it takes for you to do that, keep that going. Whatever it takes to make your mind sharp. Sometimes I take notes. Like if I've been in interviews and I've said, hey, I've asked them, do you mind if I take notes? Because while they're taking notes, I might write the question so that I can better reframe it back to them. Or I will write down questions I want to ask them later, and we'll cover that in a minute because that's important too. One of the reasons how I try to stay sharp is to understand the question behind the question. Why are they asking me this? There's always a reason why. And especially if you run into situational based interviews, which are becoming more and more common at all levels of the organization. There's a reason they're asking that. They're trying to understand something in your capabilities, your thought process. There's something they're trying to pull out of it. So like I'll give you a hint for Mars, and I apologize if any of our P&O people or HR people feel like I'm giving away the farm, but we have leadership competencies, and many companies do, and we have them assigned to the roles. So we're saying, hey, this person needs to be a problem solver. They need to be a team player. They need to be an agile leader. Whatever that capability might be, and we've defined it. So our situational questions are based around that competency, and that's one of the reasons why you'll do panels, 2 or 3 panels with 2 or 3 people, is because each of those people are responsible for 1 or 2 competencies. They're supposed to assess you on everything they hear, but the role is to really deep dive and understand how well do you do at problem solving? How well do you do at collaborating? How well do you do with prioritization, or whatever that capability might be? So don't just listen to the question on the surface and get caught up in it, because then you'll be giving unnecessary details or you won't be able to answer it concisely. What you really want to understand is, okay, what are they trying to get out of me? So if you can keep your mind focused on the question behind the question, that also helps me stay sharp, and it helps me do a better job of actually answering what I've been asked in a way that's meaningful. And the other thing I'll say before we talk about answering the question itself is don't be afraid to ask to have it repeated, especially if you want to align on a common definition of a term, or like sometimes, we'll ask a question. Some leaders will say, hey, this question is to understand your problem solving ability or your agility, right? Here's the question. If they don't, and you're trying to understand, to say, hey, I hear the question. I just want to make sure you give the right example. Are you really looking for an example where I had to do X, right? Like drive them, because they'll ask clarify. They might clarify, and that buys you time to think about which of my examples should I have prepared. And you should try to have many examples prepared for these types of questions. And that should drive from the analysis that you did of your reason why and reading the job description. Think about what types of questions they would ask you. If it's a highly technical role, then they may be asking you about, technical proficiency. And if you know too who's going to be in the room and their role in the organization, you can get a sense of what kind of questions they're going to ask. Hey, is it someone who, the VP of the role, if they're coming in, they're probably looking at you from a different lens than the purely technical. Whereas the direct manager and maybe the customer you support are looking for technical proficiency. If you can understand the role, then you can figure out, hey, they might be very interested in these types of examples. And it's good to have more than one ready. It is awkward sometimes. We've had, especially for people in like early career, where maybe, that maybe this is their second role that they're transitioning into. They don't have a wealth of experience built up yet. That's understood. So one, in that case, don't be afraid to also highlight examples from other parts of your life that are germane. If you're going for your first leadership role, or you're saying, hey, this is why I should have an informal role on this team, then, maybe it's not always a work example. Sometimes it's a school example. Sometimes it's work you did when you were it's a part-time job example, or I volunteer with the church, or I coach my kids' team. Again, most of the time, if we can understand the competency we're trying to get out of it, we can pull that out of just about any example, as long as you can communicate why you meet that competency and why I should find the example that you've used relevant. But you can get creative with your experience. It's a little more difficult and hard to deal with when you have someone who's been in the industry for a while and is coming into an interview, and every situational question you ask them, they keep giving you the same example over and over again. And what I mean by that is, I'll be like, okay, tell me about the time you did this. Hey, I did this project. Great, loved it. What about this? Same project. Oh, okay. Well, all right. Well, let's tell me about that. Okay. Well, tell me about an example of this. And I think I'm pivoting. And you're like, yeah, it's the same. Like I said before, it's the same project. One, that's concerning as the interviewer, as the hiring manager, because it just looks like you haven't built up a variety of experience or been exposed to very much. And I'm sure that's not true. So have several examples of things that you want to highlight and be prepared. So then when you get the question, you understand the question behind the question, you could say, this is the best this is the best example I have there, right? Like this is the one I can pull from my toolkit, my repertoire, inventory, whatever, and share in this moment. And when you are ready to share, I like to stick to what we call the SBAR, the situation, background, action, and result methodology. You want to answer it comprehensively, but also concisely. And a good way to do that is to the situation, which is really setting up, hopefully briefly, what was the challenge, right? Situation was, hey, we had a large pivot in direction, and we had to rethink our strategy and redo our product roadmap. That's the situation. That's about the level of detail you want. You don't want to go into, well, we brought this leader over from another division, and they were an agile shop, and we were a waterfall shop. And I mean, like, some of that can be too much, especially if it's not germane to the question behind the question. So just answer the situation. Hey, you're asking about my problem solving ability. The situation is the problem I had to solve. Background is, what is the approach and my role in the situation. So we know there's probably lots of people that have contributed to solving this problem or working on this project. Typically, what we're looking for here, especially in situations trying to assess like problem solving, if we stick with that example, So now you've defined the situation. You've told me, hey, this is the problem that we were tasked to solve. The background is this was my role in solving the problem, and this is what I did to understand it or to investigate or analyze. This is my critical thinking ability. This is how I approached it. And again, you just want to be as concise as possible. You want to share enough background to justify the action. And the action's next. And the action is, okay, what did I actually do? And this is the part of it. This is the part of it where you want to spend more time. You want to spend very little time as possible in the situation, very little time as possible on the background, 80 to 90% of your time on the action, because then this is where you say, hey, and this was the steps that I followed, any bumps that I ran into, lessons that I learned along the way. This is the meat of the question where you're answering it. And then you want to finish with the little bit of time that you have left on covering over the result. And as a result of X, and because I learned that, I was able then to do Y, right? So if you stick to the S bar and just think about where am I at as I'm answering the question, right? And as you prepare your answers, even think about this framework as you lay them out and rehearse them, so you're ready to say to kind of speak to them in the moment. But if you think about it and then just say, hey, am I spending too much time on context? I'm spending too much time on background versus action. That could really help you make sure that you're driving to the point. Because I will. I mean, a lot of times we have a very limited amount of time together. We may only have 40 minutes to an hour together. I have questions I have to get from you. I have information that as an interviewer I need to get from you. I will cut candidates off. It's not done meant out of disrespect. It's meant out of just a realization that, hey, you know, we're spending too much time on things that are not germane to the question that I've asked you, or not apropos for the situation that we're trying to assess. Let's bring you back into the moment. And or if I get what I've needed, because a lot of times I get what I need, right? And then they're still they've answered the action and the result, but now we're back discussing situation and background, especially when people are nervous. They want to go back to, oh, let me justify this. Let me talk about this. I'll cut them off and just say, hey, look, I got what, thank you. I think that's a great example. I either have a follow-up question or I think we're going to move on to the next question. Don't be thrown off by that. I think that's actually a positive thing. That's someone trying to save you. But ideally, you wouldn't even need to do it in the first place because you've already thought about what they're looking for and how you meet what they're looking for. That knowing those two things makes the rest of it much easier and much easier to align yourself to what they're looking for. When I talk about I versus we, this is another thing I tend to see is and it's hard because everyone knows things don't happen in a vacuum. There's always a team around you. Our team got a challenge. We did this. So if you're talking about situation and background, you can talk about the organization and the team. But when you get to action, I want it to be an I conversation. And what I mean by that is, you say, we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this. I'm going to ask you, hey, what was your role? What was your contribution? Because we've all been on group projects, right? Not everyone contributes equally, or not everyone was doing what I need. I'm not hiring that team. I'm hiring you as an individual. I'm wanting to know what your approach to problem solving is. I want to know how you collaborate with people. I want to know how well you can critically evaluate your own skills and gaps as it relates to this opportunity. Not what someone else did. So set it up and say, hey, the team was challenged with this. This was the constraints in which we operated, and my role was X, and I did this. And focus on what you did. I versus we. Again, I'm not hiring the team. I'm hiring you. So I want to hear what you did. And then, common questions and tips for answering. We covered a lot of that. I think situational questions are, again, trying to pull out those competencies. So, if they want, they're trying to pull out, okay, what is the technical skill set? What is the behavioral part of this? What is a mindset part of this? And this person and what I need to evaluate. So listen to what they're trying to get. Some questions are tough. And as much as we hate it, you guys, you are going to run into, managers that have a pet question that they like to ask that's completely out of left field. Do your best with it. But for the most part, if you stick to listening to the question behind the question and answer within the context of SBAR, you will avoid a lot of the common mistakes that people make in the interview itself. In the interview itself, where most people get tripped up is, they get lost in definition, they lose sight of the end state and just keep talking when they should stop. I'm probably doing it as well right now. So I'm going to transition to the next slide. And then closing out the interview. At the end, there's any questions for us? Always have a question ready. Always have a question ready. This is actually one of the biggest turnoffs for me personally as someone who's interviewing people or as a line manager, if there are no questions, because that feels like how do I know what your level of interest in this is? Do you not have any intellectual curiosity? Like, it astounds me that someone could theoretically research our company, research the role, sit through this interview, listen to the questions that I'm asking, or listen to how I introduce myself and the other people in the room. And then really at the end of that, have absolutely no questions, nothing that would help them better understand the role or better understand how they fit, or even just ask a question that allows you to positively differentiate yourself. My absolute favorite question personally to ask at the end is, hey, a year from now, when we're celebrating what we've accomplished together, what does that look like for you? What are we celebrating? And I like that question for a couple of reasons. Is one is, the way that I phrase it is when we are working together, right? A year from now, when we're successful, what have we accomplished together? What does good look like to you? I've already kind of did the trick that realtors have, right? Where once they start talking about where you're going to put your furniture in the house or which bedroom the kids are going to go in, your chance of a sale went way up. I want to create that same impression, that same hook in the minds of the people that are making a decision on whether or not I should be a part of this team. And I also like that question because then when they answer it, they're typically giving you a lot of good information. Well, a year from now, if everything goes well, we're celebrating the launch of this and this, and we've turned this around. That gives you an equal opportunity to be like, man, I love that you said that. That is one of the things I'm most excited about in this role is tackling that challenge. I faced a similar challenge at my last role, and this is how we did it, right? Like it gives you one last opportunity to create rapport, create connection, and give yourself an opportunity to positively differentiate yourself. And I need a sip of water. Apologize. So once you've gotten through the questions and you get to the next steps, set expectations. I mean, don't be afraid to say, hey, what are the next steps? If they don't offer it, ask them. When should I expect to hear from you? Who would communicate it? How would I hear from you? Okay, is there going to, find out is there going to be another follow-up interview? It's very frustrating to get into the process and to think like, okay, I should have an answer. I should have an answer next week, and then this will happen. You don't know what the internal realities of that organization are. Don't ask how many more people are you interviewing. Where am I at on the list? Not those types of questions. Just understand what you need to know about what you should expect, right? Who's going to follow up with you and when, so that if you want to follow up, you can. If they say, "Hey, I'm gonna," we'll get back to you by the end of the week. Let's say it's Tuesday, and this will get back to you by the end of the week. Okay, chances are they're interviewing other people still, but they're gonna have a decision. They'll communicate it to you. Don't bother them Friday morning with a follow up if they've communicated at the end of the week. In fact, I would actually wait until midday Tuesday. I like to do a day and a half after that commitment. Then I will follow up and just say, hey, by the way, once again, I really enjoyed it. Hey, I saw a news article online today. I saw you guys posted that you won this award. Man, that sounds so exciting. Can't wait to be part of the organization. When do you think X will happen? So you can follow up in a way that, again, positively differentiates you. But without knowing what the expectations are on timing and next steps, that's difficult to do. And it's difficult to manage. I've gone through interview processes where it was an extended period of time. It was like, okay, I meet with the HR, 3 weeks go by, I meet with the hiring manager, 2 weeks go by, I don't have an offer yet, but they asked me to come in for a town hall and just attend the town hall. I mean, like, it was not what I was expecting. I got very frustrated. And it was a good sign for me that, what, this probably actually wasn't the organization for me because they weren't organized. And I would have, if I had read that and realized that sooner, I would have saved myself some heartache, I can tell you. But yeah, just don't be afraid to ask questions. Hey, what should I expect? Who am I going to hear from next? And read the room. People, some play it straight. Some are very hard to read. I remember when when I interviewed at Mars, you know, I got home, I told my wife, I said, hey, that was the first time. I don't know if I did great and they were just, like I shocked them into silence, or if I did so terrible, they were just being polite. Like I literally couldn't read the room. Obviously, it worked out because I had a job offer within 24 hours. But I even told them that, hey, they kept poker faces. I couldn't do it. But most people are pretty open, especially when you ask that question of, hey, when should I expect to hear from you? They're going to give you some clues there usually. Very few people are savvy enough in the moment to not give you some intelligence as the person who's being interviewed. If you say, "Hey, when am I going to hear from you?" And I'm cagey or I'm dodging the question, or I won't look you in the eye, like, "Oh yeah, you may hear from us next week." If you hear that type of language, that should give you a sense of where you were at and just a piece of knowledge that you might want to have in your back pocket. And then, of course, obviously, thank everyone. Stand up, shake their hand, fist bump, acknowledge them. Whatever's appropriate for the culture and the context, but do it with everyone in the room. And then, like we talked about follow up already. The other thing I missed earlier, I want to come back to it, is when you're answering the questions, make sure you make eye contact with everyone and answer everyone equally. I have been in interviews where I have not hired a candidate because I've had concerns about biases. For example, we have interviewed candidates who, um, even though a female leader asks them questions, they won't look at her. They'll only answer a man. That's concerning to me. Maybe there's a great reason for that. Maybe you're just nervous. Maybe you think I'm this wonderfully comforting person. I don't know. But the narrative I'm telling myself is they're not being respectful to this leader. And I don't want that type of behavior in my organization, is what I'm hearing. I've also seen cases where they'll default to the person they think is the highest ranked person in the room. They will only address their answers to, or they'll kind of be dismissive of the questions of other people in the room. If I'm in a room as the manager, and I may also have maybe a senior engineer on the team or a peer to you participating in the interview, if you disrespect them or disregard them to just address me, that's going to be concerning too, because it's going to make me wonder about your team playing dynamic, or are you only interested in managing up versus managing across and down? So there's a lot of little things that you can do to throw yourself off. So make sure that you're giving equal attention to everyone who's in the room, because there's an important reason that they're there, and you need to make sure that you acknowledge that in your behavior as well. And I think I exhausted my tips. So let's open it up for questions if folks are ready.
Yeah, feel free to
Uh,
just put them in that chat box if you have any questions. Mm. Here's one. What are some subtle ways candidates can assess company culture during the actual interview process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think all the information should start from the minute you hit the parking lot, right? I mean, you you can feel an energy working in place. Does the building just feel good? Right? Is this an environment I would want to work in? Is it conducive? Is it clear that they've invested in associate well-being? I mean, even little things like what amenities are available can tell you how much a company values the well-being of its associates. The body language of the people walking into the building, or the people that greet you at the front desk and get you signed in. Those can give you important clues on a company's culture as well. Um, and ask questions. I mean, what you're walking by, be like, "Oh wow, that is so cool." Tell me about this, or, "Hey, small things. Why, why'd they name the conference rooms the way they did?" I mean, honestly, even a small thing like that can tell you a lot about a company's culture. If they're just, it's just conference room B, well, maybe this is not an organization for someone who considers themselves a creative person, right? But maybe if they named them after a brand or a value, or, something even cooler, I don't know. what else could exist out there? My imagination is limited in that regard because I'm not a creative person. But just things like that can give you the culture. And then the way people greet you and the questions that they ask, the language, how they interact with each other. I mean, you can see some interesting dynamics even just watching the people that are interviewing you. Are they standoffish? Do they seem to get along? Do they joke with each other? When I see people in meetings joking with each other or like asking about personal questions, that to me is usually a good sign that there's some camaraderie there. It's a culture that encourages that type of human connection, versus just being more task and objective oriented.
Okay, we have a few questions. How long after the interview do you suggest following up with a thank you note while also asking for next steps?
Yeah, I think thank you notes. It depends on probably on the timing, and that's a little context dependent. Like if you interview on Thursday and they're going to tell you Friday, I don't know if a thank you note makes sense, necessarily. But if it's going to be a little longer, if they say, hey, we're actually doing interviews over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll get back to you if you're shortlisted, that's a great time to do a follow up. That's the perfect moment for a follow up. And if that's the case, then what I would do is wait maybe 2 or 3 business days, right? I would let them, or if it's over a weekend, hit them like Tuesday or Wednesday the following week. And the reason I would do that is because what you're really trying to do is reinsert yourself into their decision making process, right? Hey, by the way, if I was early, don't forget I exist, right? That's what you're trying to do, and use it as a way to positively differentiate too. This is where asking questions can be good. When you send the note, customize it. Don't send the same LinkedIn message to everyone and just cut and paste their name. I've seen that. We've compared them. It's much more meaningful to me if you say, "Hey, Jonathan, I want to thank you for participating in the panel the other day. Really appreciated the provocation on X, or really appreciated your insight on Y, or love to hear the story about Z." Whatever the case may be, find something that allows you to build rapport with me, positively differentiates yourself, and then send the thank you. But from a timing perspective, give it a couple days, but think about when you're expecting your next step to be and when you might need to reinsert yourself into the process. There's no hard and fast rule. It's not 48 hours, send it out. It might be some contextual dependence.
Okay, says any suggestions related to mock interviews or researching questions that may be asked by a hiring team?
Yeah, there's a ton of online resources out there. I know, I think Fortune magazine had one a few days ago, where they put out like, hey, the top 30 like questions that we've seen by volume from hiring teams. I would look at stuff like those. I mean, those are good. Um, Again, I also like the what kind of questions would they ask me? Like, what am I being asked to do? If I'm being asked to be an enterprise architect, and my job is to evaluate the risks and opportunities and solutions and how we best, implement them, then I'm probably going to get questions about, hey, tell us about a time you had to evaluate a solution that was brand new to the organization, or tell us about a time you ran into a piece of information and you had to change course, or maybe prioritization is important. Tell us about a time you had to prioritize, and what trade-offs did you make, what decisions did you make, what framework did you make. They're trying to assess the quality of your thinking. Not they don't I don't care what you prioritized. What I care about is how did you go about the process of doing it. So most situational based questions are going to challenge technical competency, behavior, or quality of thought and critical thinking. So if you can understand which one of, what questions might come up related to those three, you're going to be in a good place. And I'd even find a list. Maybe just find a list of like, hey, these are the top 50 situational questions that interviewers ask, because they're pretty standard across the industry. And then just start to group them in those three categories, right? These are questions that attack competency. These are ones that try to draw out insights and inferences into critical thinking. That can give you a helpful framework. And then even if they change the wording of the question a little bit, because you have the context of, oh, they're trying to assess my problem solving ability, you can still answer the question, even if, it's not something you're 100% prepared for. You can keep it in the ballpark.
Okay. Noah asked if you could please repeat the difference between the background and action steps of SBAR.
Yeah, they're depending on how complex the situation is, sometimes you need them to be very concrete. Sometimes they can blend into each other. So the way that I personally think about it when I've done, the S bar and think about my own response is I've done the situation, I've explained this was the organizational context to the problem, right? This is why something occurred. Again, keep it very limited. Background is this was my role, right? So maybe this was a massive organizational problem. That's the situation. But my role was to figure out the marketing technology element of it, or to figure out the cybersecurity element of this thing, or just one element of a program. That's the background. What was my specific role? And then actions is then what did I do to solve this and what result? And then it leads into results. So the background is just positioning. I know the context, right? I know, like in a movie, um, I know the setting, right? They've set up the setting. The background is I'm the character. What is my role as the character in this scene? And then the action is what is my scene? What are my lines? What did I do? And what did I hopefully, what outcomes did I get? I think another question too, you talk about the question that always scares people is what is your greatest fear? Like I know people love that question, or hate that question, depending on what side of the table you're on. That's another one where, again, they're not really asking like what scares you the most about this? What's your biggest weakness, right? What's your biggest weakness, I should say. I get that one a lot. When we ask that question, what we're trying to understand is
Mhm.
critical thinking. Because I've had people say, I have no weaknesses. Or I've said, hey, I know you're an internal candidate, you're looking to transition in this role. You know, what do you think is going to be the biggest hurdle you have to overcome to be successful in this new role? Right? That's that both of those are really asking the same question. The questions they're asking is, how well have you evaluated where you're at in the context of this role, and how honest are you with yourself and us? That's incredibly important. That self-awareness is incredibly important.
And what about like, I think one of the questions that I've always found to be difficult to answer is the tell me about yourself question. And have you heard
Oh
any
yeah.
creative ways to answer the question? And how far back do you want me to go?
Uh, yeah. So that is actually probably as a person being interviewed, my least favorite question,
Yeah.
because I mean, that's tough because you don't know how much to answer. Um, what I typically do is I try to think about, okay, what's going to make them want to connect? What's going to want to make them work with me as an individual, right? What's going to want them to have me in this role, right? So like, what in my background is pertinent? It's just like resumes. I don't need to know if you've been in the game a while and you use. I don't need to know you're proficient in a technology that has been relevant for 20 years. I also don't need to hear about that experience. Summarize the things that are not important. I am a technology professional with 20 years of leadership experience in the X industry, Y industry, Z industry. My current role is this, or the experience I've done that you're most think is most appropriate to the role that you're interviewing for. Highlight that briefly, and then share some personal insights. I mean, a lot of times what people are assessing as well is, do I even want to work with this person? Like, am I going to enjoy this person? Even if I think you're technically competent, if I think I'm going to hate having you sit next to me in an open office, I'm probably not going to want to hire you. Or if I don't think you're going to be a good cultural fit for the team, so don't be afraid to be a little vulnerable. Hey, I'm from X. I moved here because of Y, or, you know, um, I have a partner, I have kids, I work for a pet care company. So the number one question you get is tell us about your pets.
Mhm.
So, you got to be able to either answer that or tell us why you don't have pets. But little things like that. I think when they ask you that question, again, think about what's the purpose of it. It's not so you can just word vomit your life story. It's so they can connect with you, the person. They're just trying to get some content. They're trying to get a context of why are you sitting across from me? Because for
Mhm.
most people, all they have is a copy of your resume and a copy of the job description, and the question they're supposed to ask. That's what the average panelists come up with. That question is to create context for why you are in the room, and it has to go beyond just what's on the resume.
Okay. Awesome. If we have a few more minutes to take a couple of questions. Um, but if no one else does, we can go ahead and wrap this up. Just waiting a few more seconds just to make sure no one else has a question. Oh, here we go. Okay. Thank you for helping talk interviews, but okay. What strategies do you recommend for early career professionals navigating the current challenging job market, especially in fields like data science and ML, where competition is intense and junior roles are limited?
That's a tough one. Yeah, that's a lot there. I think the challenge in the junior, I mean, challenge in most junior roles, especially ones that are oriented around emerging technologies, but ones that have fairly broad scale adoption, right? Like machine learning. We're creating many of these roles now because they're becoming attractive, but the skill set is fairly commoditized in junior roles. So that's where that positive differentiation of you as a person comes in. And that's where, you know, also highlighting experiences from outside of a university program or, the first or second job you've had in industry can be really powerful. You want to try to, and again, I'm not saying this is easy. I know this sounds kind of pithy, like it's easy to do, but you have to find your own unique value proposition as to why am I the person that you want in this role as a junior person or a senior person. Is true for both, but for junior people you still have to answer that question too. The other thing is sometimes maybe that's not the right role for you based on the experience and opportunities you actually want. So I would just say in general, get creative in the things that you'll be willing to do. Sometimes it's not the obvious jobs that are going to be the place for you. So for example, if you're interested in data science, you want to be a data scientist, you want to come work for Mars. We have a central data science organization that recruits very, very well from sources. You might be able to get in. But what if there's a data science role within the marketing organization? That might be a better one for you to go for because they might see something in you that's differentiated enough. You know what I mean? So like don't just follow the standard path that everyone else follows. Tend to get creative and really exercise your agility and your ability to be adaptable within the organization is a key differentiator. But it is limited. It's tough. Um, but that's a macroeconomic issue that's well beyond, I think anything one person can solve. I would say just try to differentiate. And things you can do to differentiate, get involved with the NTC. Right? I love to see, hey, volunteered at the Nashville Innovation Summit, right? Was a student of the year at MTSU and recognized by the NTC for doing X. Get involved with professional organizations, get certifications, anything that makes you rise above your peer. If you both got the same degree program from the same school, what's going to make you stand out? Well, something that showed initiative, something that showed a little extra, something that showed that you have a diversity or breadth of experience within this field. Those are the things that will help you kind of rise above a very crowded, very noisy, very homogenous field of candidates.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have today. I'd like to thank you again, Jonathan, for hosting this tech coach. This session has been recorded, so it'll be on our YouTube channel later today, and I'll send it out to everyone as well. But please join us at our next one. It's November 14th. It's going to be on job search strategies and networking with LinkedIn. So that'll be a great one as well. But thank you all for being here today, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.